Well, I'm going to share my screen, everyone. I did put together wait a second, a PowerPoint thing. I have been working with Lori and Jonathan and Bruce and John Dietering to learn a little more about our county and how our county government works. And as part of that process, I actually went and interviewed a county commissioner who was referred to me, who was a commissioner in a different county. Somebody that the person who referred me, and Byrie actually referred me to her, she really respected her. So I thought that I'd get a good take on how county government works by talking with her. And I also talked to the Association for Minnesota Counties, and I just gathered some other information. And so I'm going to give you an overview of what I learned, and then we're going to, at the end, talk a little bit about how you can interact with your county commissioners. And specifically, we'll talk about what we're working on with solar right now, but it doesn't just, begin and end with solar. So we can think about this as more encompassing than just solar. So, what is county government? So a county is a territorial division and a unit of local government. They're, made up of towns, cities, rural populations, but counties vary very much. How a county operates can vary from state to state, from country to country. So there are counties all over the world in all different countries, but they might not operate exactly the same. So in the United States, counties are usually government units that operate below the state level, and that's what happens in Minnesota. So right now in Wright County, we have many levels of government operating. We have the federal government. It's doing legislation work here. It's impacting how we, the rules and regulations we have to follow, and it's funding things. We have state involvement. We have program oversight for health and human services and other programs, the DNR, for example, and they do get involved, or they do oversight on implementation of those programs, and they also provide funding. We have the county working to implement programs, planning, and property rights, and we have townships. So we have these different levels working in the county, and I just thought for a understanding of how complex it can get, I'd show a little picture of our county. And this is a transportation map of our county. And you can see all the different roads and all of our different townships. So the different townships are outlined in the squares. And up here you can see 94 going through the top of Wright County. And 94 is an interstate highway or an interstate freeway. So it's got federal regulation and federal oversight and federal funding dollars that comes into impacting the 94. Then you've got Highway 55 and Highway 12 down here, which are state highways. You also have like 25, 25 is a state highway, 24, which is coming out of Clearwater up here somewhere, that's a state highway. They receive state dollars to keep and maintain them. Then you've got county roads like County Road 6, which is up by Annandale, or you got County Road 7, 8, 9, which they run north-south through our county. Those are all county roads, and counties fund those. So right now you've got 3 different types of roads in our county that are being funded by different mechanisms. And then you've got the little township roads. So like I live over here near Annandale, and I'm not in the city of Annandale, but I live on 62nd Street, and that's funded by our township. So the maintenance of it, the plowing of it, the graveling of it is all done through the township. Annandale City, on the other hand, has their own funding mechanism for doing their streets and roads. And they do property easements and so forth so that they can, or property taxes that fund the roads in each of the little towns and cities. So you've got all these levels of government operating in this county, and I think the transportation system is an excellent way to kind of see how that all works together. So what does county government in Minnesota do? Here's some highlights of what it does. It does transportation, roads, sidewalks, trails. It does healthcare, especially public health and elder care. It does drainage and water flow. You go into a county meeting and you're bound to hear about those ditches, right? It does property management in the sense that it decides on property taxes. It decides how a property is classified. So if it's agricultural versus industrial versus residential, etc. So it kind of has a lot to do with how our property is managed. It also, will give out permits after you can build on your property, those sorts of things. So it manages all of that process. Counties also do county parks and resource management. So they might get involved with how our lakes are doing, those sorts of things. And in Wright County, we have a sheriff's services. Not every sheriff department is run the same way, but in Wright County, our sheriff's office, even though our sheriff himself is elected by, in an election, he's an elected official. His budget and his operations is technically underneath the county commissioners. So he runs his sheriff's department. I don't want to make it sound like the county commissioners really have much say there, but he's technically part of that unit, of the county unit. So counties, this really surprised me, really don't do much legislation. They don't make laws, basically. They might make a few laws around planning and zoning, but that's it. A few regulations around that, but they really don't have much impact. They don't sit together, and they're not lawmakers, our county commissioners. They more are about operations of the county. And in Minnesota, much of their work is focused on implementing programs that are legislated by either the federal government or the state government. So for instance, during the pandemic, both the state and federal government provided funds and legislated their use. They said, here's some money, it should go to small businesses, it should go to people, it should go into unemployment. And then that money trickled down to the counties who were charged with spending it in the appropriate way, or not spending it, as a case may be sometimes. So much of the work of counties is about implementing programs that are legislated by higher levels of government, so to speak. They do get independent funds from property taxes, and that's all theirs to control and decide how they're going to spend it. So a little brief overview of what county government does in Minnesota. I just want to say that not every county operates the same way, and not every state has this structure. So different states have different ways of implementing programs at the local level, and not all of the states do that through their county government. So it can vary by state. So as I was saying, the focus varies by county. Different counties operate differently. They focus on the needs of their local community, and so they run their county accordingly. So for instance, some counties decide they need a hospital, and they put hospitals in, and they run the hospitals. There's county hospitals. Some counties put in childcare centers and run the childcare centers. I thought that was really innovative because there's a big childcare shortage. So Renville County decided it would build a childcare center, and then it charges normal fees for the childcare center, but it's run by the county. So I thought that was very innovative. There's a coalition of counties, so counties might work together, and a coalition of them, including Beaker County, that are part of a healthcare plan. So they provide healthcare coverage. They don't have a hospital or anything. They provide coverage or plans, insurance plans, through their collaborative. And then counties might collaborate on parks and trails. Different counties do different things. So we have actually a really good park system in Wright County. One of the things that happens in Wright County really well, I think. So county government is all about relationships. So county government, as you're kind of getting the picture, has to work with a lot of different players. They have to work with townships, they have to work with other counties, they have to work with state and federal governments, they have to build coalitions around specific issues, and they might work with nonprofits or other entities that were created for specific purposes. Like the District 8 Regional Committee for Transportation is an example of a coalition that's working in a specific region. In fact, I just talked to one that operates out of Wilmer. I think it's called the Mid-Minnesota Economic Development something. And they are a regional entity working in 4 counties doing work around economic development. Regional library systems are another example of relationships they have to work with. Watershed districts are separate from counties. So they often have to, because they are supposed to be managing the water in a county area, they have to work with the watershed districts, economic development relationships, associations, other cooperative ventures. Like I said, that health insurance cooperative, or there's a Woodlands mental health care system that's in several counties. So these partnerships are really common at the county level, and a lot of the work they do is in partnership with others. So governance of Wright County, when I went online, I just pulled some of this information right offline. I didn't try to delve too deeply into any of it. This is what came up just, immediately as soon as I was looking at the website, is they have these different levels of sort of, so to speak, committees or groups that are doing different things in the county. So they have the Board of Adjustments, a 5-member board appointed by the Wright County Board of Commissioners that looks at variances and zoning ordinances and zoning maps and floodplain boundaries and that sort of thing. So they look at those things. And the Board of Appeal and Equalization is where you can go when you're not happy with what the Board of Adjustment has decided, or not happy with a ruling. So they kind of do appealing for tax assessments and other county decisions. Of course, we have a Board of Commissioners that are elected, and they oversee the governing of the county. There's a Health and Human Services Board, which oversees programs that are often funded through state or federal dollars, although they will also receive county dollars at times. So this is huge, that Health and Human Services in the county level. There's a Park and Recreations Commission in Wright County, and then there's a Planning Commission that looks at conditional use permits and kind of thinking about the surrounding area and the community as a whole and how to plan for that. So county commissioners are a huge piece of how the county operates, but not the only piece, because each of those departments that I just mentioned also have staff working on them. And there is a city administrator. His name is Lee Kelly. I almost forgot, Lee Kelly. And he is like the paid person, sort of like an executive director of the county. He comes in and helps implement things. And the county commissioners are the board members. They govern. Lee's more responsible for operations. So it's not just the county commissioners. They work in partnership with a team of employees. But the county commissioners are elected officials who make and enforce county policies. They're responsible for goal setting and long-range county planning. And their results are evaluated internally by their staff and by public opinion, supposedly. I'm not sure how much the evaluation is actually happening, especially when I think about the public, who doesn't seem to pay much attention unless they're angry that their zoning law isn't what they want it to be or something along that line. So I'm not sure how much evaluation actually happens. All counties in Minnesota have 5 commissioners, with the exception of a couple of the larger counties, which have 7. So Hennepin County has 7 commissioners. All other counties have 5 commissioners. When they're passing a new ruling or an ordinance or an agreement, they have to have 3 of the commissioners have to agree. Because it's 3 commissioners having to agree, when they have a committee that the commissioners serve on, and I'm going to share some information on committees in a minute, typically only 2 commissioners will serve on a committee. They won't have 3 commissioners on the committee, because if there's 3 commissioners on the committee, then suddenly there's this conflict where they might as well just have the whole board looking at it, because they then have enough power to pass whatever they decide. So basically, this is a rule that they follow. It might even be law. I'm not 100% certain that only 2 commissioners can be on a committee. When there's more than 2 commissioners meeting, it's considered open for the public. If there's less than 2 commissioners, it can be considered private, although we've had success in going to some of those meetings also, because they are technically doing public work. But according to Minnesota Supreme Court, open meeting law applies only. So the open meeting law means that the meeting has to be open to everybody in the public. It only applies if a quorum of members of the governing body or committee or subcommittee, board, department, etc. is present. So if 3 commissioners are present, they have a quorum. So then the open meeting law applies. If there's only 2 commissioners, then it does not apply and they don't have to make it technically a public meeting. So here's our districts in Wright County. We have 5 commissioners, because all counties do, except for the big ones. We have District 1, which is this funny shaped one here, has Buffalo and Annandale in it, but not Maple Lake, got squeezed out. We've got District 2, which is up here with Monticello and Maple Lake and Clearwater. We've got District 3, which is kind of small, but a big population area of St. Michael and Otsego. District 4 has Albertville and goes way over here, and so just south of Buffalo. So I always thought it was funny, John Dietering is in the same district as, say, someone who lives in Albertville. I always thought that was kind of interesting. And then we've got a huge District 5 down here at the bottom. Now with the new census, these district lines may change because redistricting is happening. So we will see what happens to them. So here's our commissioners. District 1, commissioner is Christine Hewsome. She's my commissioner. And she serves on the following boards. So you can see the huge number of boards they have. She serves on the Budget Committee of the Whole, the Transportation Committee of the Whole, Nuclear, Safety, Security, Ways and Means, and 911 Planning Committee. But she also is on the Aquatic Invasive Species Advisory Board, and just a number, Highway 55 Coalition, the Law Library Board, just a number of other entities that she also serves on. And then way down here, she also does some human services activities, and she is a delegate to the Association of Minnesota Counties. So that's Christine. Then we have Derek Vetch, and he is also very active in a lot of things. So you can see him. Interesting, Lori, that he serves on nuclear, as does Chris. I just found that kind of interesting. So, and it's interesting, they have a committee just for nuclear, not energy committee, it's a nuclear committee. So that you can see serves on a lot of different committees. This is just open information. You can go to the website and look it up in 2 minutes. You know, if you just go out and Google it. Mark DeLyden serves in District 3. He has a few less committees. He is the chair of the commissioners right now, so he's operating that way also. He's also a delegate to the Association of Minnesota Counties, and he serves on the Health and Human Services Policy Committee. Then we have Mary Wetter. She has even fewer committees that she's part of. Then we have Mike Kaczmarek, and he's new, he's our newest commissioner, and he's not on very many committees either. I mean, it's still quite a few, but it's interesting how they are assigned to these different committees. They kind of do it they did it at the beginning of the year after the election, you know, when Mike started. They all chose what committee they were going to be on, and it was just kind of a free-for-all from what I heard. You know, like, I want that committee and I want that committee. So it's kind of interesting how people end up on the different committees. Something to explore for us in the future.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, Renee. If you ever watched that in the beginning of the year when they pick their committees, they don't try to divide them out equally, which is crazy. And then the people that are really what I would call pushy, as particularly one, just won't let anybody else be on certain committees. He'll say, nope, I want that one, you know, and then it just, you know, people are intimidated by this guy. So he's, you know, he gets all the really good committees and he tends to get a lot of them. And people like Mary Wetter, even when she says she wants one, she doesn't get on it because they'll say, well, we already have 2, we don't need you. And so it's really lopsided. They don't try to divvy up anything equally. They all fight for the ones that they think, especially budget. Everybody wants budget. But it's a terrible process.
I have a question, Renee. So if they're on, you know, our commissioners are on these meetings, who else are on these committees? who else are on the committees?
Yeah.
Is it a
So
set
the
number of-
committees are really interesting because from what we can tell that they're kind of handpicked, they allow onto the committee, handpicked by the commissioners. So
Are
if
they-
you're interested in a committee, you're not necessarily able to get on it. So
Are they people in the community? Are they people that are working for Wright
they
County?
do have
or-
to live in the county,
Okay.
yes. And be, or, you know, they, or be business. So like there's a task force right now on solar, has some business people on it who don't live in the county, but they are involved in business in the county. So, but, and I'm not 100% certain if committees actually have to, you have to live in the county, but I'm thinking you do for the committee. A task force is a little different. The committees are more formal. So again, there's layers of governance going on here.
So on the committee thing, Renee,
Mhm.
yes, you do have to be in the county, but this year there was only 2 positions open in on any committee. And when I called earlier in the year to ask the process for getting on the committee, they said, sorry, there wasn't any openings. And I said, well, who will be coming off? And they said, there's no terms for the committees. And Dan Bravender, who happens to live in my district, is on a ton of them, and he's been on them forever. So they never have to come up.
Yep.
So it's a horrible system, and I agree with Renee. We need to change that. It just becomes the same people on the same committees making all the what do you want to call it, the rules or the whatever. It's, in fact, they even call Dan Bravender commissioner, and he's not a commissioner, but he's just been on the committee so long. The other thing is the commissioners for committees, they all get per diems, and they vote in their own per diems.
So,
So as you can see, there's some, I want to finish what I'm talking about.
Go
We
ahead,
can get
Grace,
into
sorry
some
about that.
questions for what we should be maybe asking our commissioners about once I've kind of done the whole picture
Yeah.
here. Because there is some things we might be wanting to ask ourselves as citizens of the county about how things are operating in our county. So commissioner meetings happen, and they're public meetings because there's a quorum of people at that meeting, a quorum of the voting board at all commissioner meetings. So they are open to the public. They happen most Tuesdays at 9 a.m. You can go virtually or in person, and to go virtually, you just go out to their website, look for the meeting. There's a link right to join the meeting. And so anybody can attend at any point in time, but that does not mean you get to talk at those meetings. You can listen to them, hear what they have to say, but that doesn't mean that they're gonna ask you what you're thinking or even invite you to say anything, because you're basically there to be just listen and observe, not to respond. So to be heard at a meeting, you must send in a request to be on the agenda, or you need to send in a comment to your commissioners before the meeting. And Lori, do you remember if it's a couple days before, or does it vary?
It's the Wednesday before the following Tuesday, so it's a very long period of time. I mean, it's like, I just think it's kind of ridiculous, the amount of time that you've got to send them in. But anyway.
Yep. Yeah, so you have to make your comment or request to be on the agenda before the meeting. And, but otherwise you can attend and observe the meeting at any time. In fact, you could go to any county and observe their meetings. We've been talking about visiting like Stearns County or Sherburne County to see how they're different than Wright County. Committee meetings are a different animal. As I said, there's only 2 commissioners on each committee, which is, to Lori's point earlier, if somebody grabs a lot of them, that leaves only 1 open spot for the other 4 commissioners. So they're the only two commissioners on a committee, and they are not always open to the public, but we have had luck in attending these meetings. But in general, they could say they're closed meetings because there is no law stating they have to invite people to them. These meetings, you are not generally, you're just there to listen. Again, if you want to make a comment or listen, you're not going to be on the agenda, but if you want to, influence anything, you got to talk to your county commissioner. That's the appropriate place to go to. And then they should bring it forward to that meeting. But if they're not in that meeting, then they have to bring it to the other commissioner who's supposed to bring it forward. So it could be, your voice can really get lost in this process. And then the other thing that happens at the county level are public meetings. And this is specifically to bring in public input. So they will hold a public meeting around a specific issue, like they held a public meeting around solar energy and solar farms. And I went to that, and they did ask people to stand up and comment, and I did stand up and comment. So, and I didn't have to do any submitting of my questions or my comments. I was just invited to comment. However, many times they seem to be held after decisions have already been made. So it's more like they're just informing the public of what they've decided or what they're going to do. And it's not so much about figuring out what they should be doing, so much as, just making sure they check that off their list, that they let people have their say and ask their questions. So am I missing any meetings, Lori, do you think?
No, I don't think at all.
Yeah, I think there's committees, and then there's task force. So that might be another level that I didn't put on here. It's sort of like the solar meetings are a task force, not so much a committee. Committees tend to be regular and there all the time. And this solar task force is put together they call it a committee too, but it's more of a task force and it's temporary. So they operate a lot like the committee meetings. So ways to communicate with your county commissioner: you can call them, you can email them, you can send them a letter. They are your representative. They are supposed to be available for you. You could call them every day if you wanted to, and really get to be cozy with them. So when if you decide you're going to really talk to your commissioner, there's a few things you might want to do. One is to make sure the issue you're broaching is one they have power over. I've sat in, town halls where, for instance, Tom Emmer, where people are asking about things that are really state level questions. And Tom will just say, I don't have any influence over that. You have to talk to your state representative. So make sure that what you're broaching to the commissioners is something they actually have power over. They're not going to have power over, what the federal government is doing around, immigration, for instance. So you can't talk to them about that because they can't do anything about it. It's good to always have specific information to share. So, like you can always call your commissioner and just say, I'm really confused about this. Can you share your thinking on it? But you're going to be more effective if you actually understand the situation a little bit and bring your own information. Don't expect them to inform you. They actually work for you, so you should be informing them on what you think. And you can ask them to have a response to you. They should be responding to you and keeping you informed about issues that are important to you. So here are some of the questions I put down about what we should be asking ourselves about our county. And the first one is, who can get into committees? Right now they don't seem to be open to the public. So, what Lori was just talking about, why is it so hard to be on committees? What is the process for training county commissioners? Is there a process for training them? So Mike Katzmack just started. Did he get any training? He wrote and submitted an ordinance that had a number of, it was poorly written. And, did he get training on what to put in an ordinance? These are things we could be asking our commissioners. How do our commissioners make decisions? What influences them? How do they decide when something is a good idea or when it's not? How do they gather information on topics that are beyond their own understanding? For instance, with solar, how do they understand and know what's happening with solar? What is the role of community citizens in the decision-making process? This is a whole nother area that we should be asking about. What is our voice and where is it important and how can we have a voice? So is it only about the election? Do we only get to have a voice in saying this person is going to be someone we elect? Is it only about being able to elect our representatives, or should we have more input into the whole process of how counties work? And for that matter, states and federal governments too. Or are we just subject to the whims of whoever is able to get elected? And who influences county decision-making processes? And I think another one I didn't put on here, but it would be a really good one, is who's overseeing the county to make sure they're actually making good decisions? How are they being evaluated? You know, so those are some of the questions I had. Is, maybe now we can just kind of pause for a moment. I'm just going to stop for a second and see if there's other questions that other people have that we should be like maybe thinking about and talking about with our county commissioners. Did anything else pop into anyone's minds?
I don't know if this is public, Renee. I don't even know if you can get it. And it's kind of maybe more of a curiosity, but I don't know what public commissioners are paid. I'm assuming that you can find that out. And I also, every time that they go to a meeting, they kind of sit around and say, well, should we collect a per diem for that? And then they all kind of hedge for a while. And then they decide, yeah, maybe we should collect a per diem for that. And they are collecting per diems right and left. And I think they also take travel expense and things like that. So I know I've talked to Mike about him because I talk to him every week. And he said, well, I can't tell you historically because I'm new, but he said a lot of people collect per diems when they're on committees. Well, no wonder then they never want to come off, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, a lot of managers and staff people here are making a lot more than what the budget says because they too can collect for, different things. And so I'm really wanting to understand beyond base salaries, what are people paid? And the only reason I shouldn't say the only reason, but the reason that he got involved is, Mike and I, it's surprising we talk once a week because we don't get along about just about anything. But he, his big deal is he doesn't want to spend any money. And so he's tearing apart the budget all the time and trying to figure out why does the budget have this, but we really spent this. So anyway, that would be one of the questions is what things are county commissioners paid for other than base salary? And, and I don't know if I'm assuming that's public, but I've been really curious to know what they're really making.
Yeah, all of that information should be public. Kim, you had an idea or a thought.
I was just interested because that was the question that was on my mind was, how much do these guys make?
Mm-hmm.
I don't do you have an idea of even, Lori, what the base salary is?
I did. I was trying to find it, but I can't find it. And I think it is on the website. But one of the things that Mike mentioned to me is he said, if we call an after hours meeting or something, he said, people want to be paid more for that. He goes, it isn't like we have office hours. So there's always the question of, well, should we collect, travel time for that? Should we call that a per diem? And I've noticed that in so many meetings, that question comes up. Well, are we paid extra for doing this or that or whatever? Yeah. So anyway, I don't think it's very clear, even for the commissioners, how that's
so
done.
That's another question for us to work on. Any other questions that people popped in people's minds that they would have for their commissioners?
So who oversees the commissioners?
We do.
How?
The public.
How?
Well, we don't do a very good job of it, do we? All right, now I think we're not overseeing them. And so that so at the very beginning, one of the first slides, I said that the county commissioners are regulated by the staff who are supposed to be raising questions when they're not doing something in a way that fits with the rules and the way it should be done. And then they're overseen by us, their constituents. And so what most people would say is that if we don't like the county commission, we should just, not vote for them next time.
So when you say staff, Renee, who's the staff?
So Lee Kelly is the county administrator. He's like the executive director of the county or a CEO of the county. So he reports to the board, they hire him, but he also is the head of the staff. And then there's multitudes of staff at the county. I don't know what their number of staff members are, and I didn't quite get into that in the slides, but there's probably well over 100 people working for the county. Because there's all these different departments. There's transportation people, there's parks and recreation people, there's a huge human services, department. And much of the money for human services comes from the state and federal government, so they're not necessarily just, the money is channeled through the county, so the county pays them, but the money isn't generated here. It's generated through state and federal fundraising, whatever they do, their revenue streams. So, so there's lots of staff that work at the county level, and then they all report to their department heads, just like any other organization is set up. So, and of course, they all report to the board, so it's pretty difficult for them to, ultimately, they all report to the board. The board is their boss, and so it's pretty hard for them to question things the board is doing. And a lot of staff, because this is where I did my doctorate, is public administration, a lot of staff feel like they're just there to take the orders from the board. There's sort of a division amongst people on whether they should just take the orders or whether they should be active in really helping to steer the county, and different administrations do different things. So, but the citizens are ultimately the people who should be oversight on this. So I'm going to just share a little more.
I have on occasion called Lee Kelly and complained about commissioners, and he did call me back and say, I met with them and I told them what you didn't like about the way they were interacting. And so I don't know if it actually does any good or not, but at least if you need a face to complain to, you can talk to him. And
They
he
do
does.
notice when you call them, because they've been saying things in meetings lately, because we've been calling them more.
Yes.
So,
Yes, they are really noticing that the public's getting involved and it's freaking them out.
yeah. So I was going to talk a little bit about one of the issues that our county commissioner group has been following, which is the current solar issue. It's not for solar on homes, it's for solar farms. And it was this year, early this year, and I don't remember the exact date, if it was January or when they did it, but early this year, the Wright County commissioners voted for in a solar farm moratorium. They said that it was an emergency, that there was issues they needed to resolve, and they needed to close down all projects. I went to that meeting, and that was the meeting I spoke at, and a number of people said, what is the emergency? Well, we need to make sure these certain things are happening and in place. And so the question that was raised in my mind is, why did they let it go until it was an emergency? First of all, to me, that seems pretty poor planning. Or they're not being truthful about it being an emergency, or there was some other factor going on. It's just really hard to tell. The other thing is they were just talking about changing some regulations, and they made out that it wasn't that big a deal. And yet it's been months, and they keep, stalling on conversations. They keep, going over the same ground in the meetings, and they don't seem to be moving forward and making any decisions. And so I also wondered why, if these regulations weren't that big a deal, why they couldn't just make them while they were still, had a solar. Well, they didn't have a solar moratorium. You can change things. You don't have to have a moratorium in order to make changes. You can just make changes. They could just vote in changes, but they closed down all solar farm projects. So right away, those raised some red flags to me that there was bigger purposes going on. And I even, again, I was looking at who is on the fact that there's a nuclear committee and who's on that nuclear committee, and the fact that those commissioners have been really vocal that solar is a bad thing, have made me more suspicious, even more so now. They formed a task force to explore who was the solar. They chose the people who were going to be on it. They did bring in the two companies, the two businesses that are from out of the county. I believe both of the businesses are not based in the county, but they're small Minnesota businesses. And they do have them represented, and they brought some farmers in. But it was kind of like, we were watching this happen, and there was no place that we could say, we want to be on the task force, we want a voice here. That was not even a question that we could have asked. They weren't interested in hearing from us on that at all. Some of the things they're really looking at is this implementation of a surety. They want the companies to pay that up front, so that when decommissioning happens in 30+ years, They have money to help with the decommissioning, even though it's not the county's responsibility to decommission these. So the county wants to have this money put aside so that they have money for something they don't have to do down the road. And so it's kind of a really odd, another red flag in my mind. They wanted to look at restrictions on solar farms. They want to talk about, you know, where they can go, and they want to talk about screening solar farms from public view, because the public shouldn't, you know, have to look at these eyesores, you know. And Lori always laughs and says, I live right next to a pig farm, you know, that, you know, if I can stand that, people can stand some solar farms, you know. So they want to regulate the types of vegetation under solar panels. They're all worried about weeds growing under the solar panels, not in the ditches, mind you. They don't mind if they're in the ditches beside the road, but they're worried about the weeds under the solar panels, and the ability of current projects to continue. So there was some projects that were all agreed upon. They had all the right permits ready to start. And right when they were about to start, the moratorium went in place. And so basically they lost this whole season because they were gonna build in the spring, and they were told, nope, you can't do it. And now here we are coming up on June. So basically these projects haven't been able to move forward at this whole entire year. So they've lost the year basically. So there's a lot of red flags happening there. And what really bothers me most of all is that when you go to these meetings, they hash the same thing over and over again. And I mean, my goodness, if you don't want to have solar, just vote not to have it. I mean, what's the game playing that's going on, you know? And there seems to be these games of just they keep going back to the same things and say we can't do this and we can't do that. And it's just this odd. And then John Dietering attended a meeting, and he said, well, you know, it seems like you guys don't want solar. And they're like, well, why would you think that? Well, because of how you're acting, you know. So if if you're honestly concerned about having solar in this county, then you should be, the solar farms in particular, maybe you should be doing something more than just continually talking about the same subject at every meeting. So Lori wrote this up. I'm going to give you credit for this, Lori. Wright County commissioners continue to stall on any decision on solar and refuse to end the solar moratorium. There are solar agreements that have waited almost a year to begin construction. It's about 6 months actually, but they've been working on them for over a year. Please send a strong message to every commissioner, and Sean Riley, who is one of those staff people, he's the planning and zoning administrator who reports to Lee Kelly, to, sometimes my screen covers the words. Wait a second. To end the moratorium and support solar in Wright County. It's solid income for farmers, which it is. A lot of farmers can, there's been farmers, I shouldn't say a lot of farmers, who were really struggling, and then they were able to put these solar farms in, which only go on a small portion of their land. And they were able to then bring in new income that has helped their farms stay afloat. They create high-paying jobs for people who are installing the solar panels. So it's a trade job that can bring income to families in the community. And it doesn't affect AG, that's agricultural cropland, because you really don't use that much land. The solar farms are a small portion of the land. Right now, I think we have like 40 solar projects in Wright County. And if we put the maximum number of solar projects we could have out there, I think something like 400, it would only be 1% of our farmland. So one of the complaints is that, well, we want to stay a farming community, and these are going to make us seem not agricultural anymore, which is just, you know, again, not real based in reality. And, you know, most importantly, we must reduce greenhouse gas emissions and convert from toxic fossil fuels now. The commissioners are worried about the support of solar in the community. Let's not let up the pressure. So by talking to the commissioners and talking to people about the fact that we think solar is something that should be happening in Wright County, we have caught their attention. So that's it. That's what I had to share. And I'm going to stop, and you guys can ask your questions or provide more information. Lori, if you have other things you want to add.
No, I thought that was really, really fantastic, Renee. The thing that bothers me sometimes is that we have lost track of the main issue here. which is fossil fuels. You know, the commissioners never talk about greenhouse gas. They've just lost, they're afraid they're going to lose egg cropland. Well, you know, and like Renee said, it's like a nothing as far as the amount of, but they don't talk about fossil fuels. It's just, they're missing the whole point. And also, like Renee mentioned, and Mike talked to me, in fact, this morning, they're really worried about the fact that they're getting so much pushback on solar. They had at their planning meeting Tuesday, they were like, you know, we got to get a more positive image out there. People are getting upset about that. I heard they're talking about it at townships. So if you don't ever, I mean, sometimes I think the same way too, you know, nobody ever listens or anything anyway, but they're listening this time and they're worried. So we make more of a difference than we think we do. And another thing that they brought up is, have you noticed, this was at their Tuesday planning meeting, have you noticed how many people are watching our meetings? We used to have 3 and sometimes we have 60, and what in the heck's going on? So they're getting a little nervous about, you know, that we're watching stuff.
So one thing I do know from working with city, you know, administrators, public administrators, and public elected officials, they like to measure how well they're doing by how little the public
Yes.
interacts with them.
Yes.
And if the public starts interacting with them a lot, they start to get really worried, like, what am I missing? And why am I not suddenly out of, you know, not suddenly fitting in with my community? The good ones do. Other ones just, you know, are looking to drive their own issue, irregardless of what the community thinks. And they just want to go under the radar so that you don't. The good ones are saying, well, wait, there's all these people here because of why? What am I missing? I got to do something differently. And the ones that aren't so good are saying, all these people are here. I want them to not notice what I'm doing because I want to push through my own issue. So it's really important for us to be paying attention to these things. And I think for a long time we haven't. And I did write a letter to the editor. A number of people did. I put it in in the Annandale Advocate. And I did get a response from my county commissioner, Christine, that, you know, she really was arguing back. I still haven't read it. I had other people read it. I was just like, I just don't want to even bother because I just know she's going to be negative and I didn't want to hear it. And she basically was saying, you know, no, you've got it all wrong. Solar panels are harmful to the environment and they're bad for us and we shouldn't have them. And I said, no, they're not, you know, which was in my point in my article. And so she's on the nuclear committee, and I just cannot help but feel that she's getting information. Her influence is from that committee. It's not from the reality of what solar energy is doing in our counties. And so let's put aside the whole issue that can get kind of politicized about, you know, greenhouse gases and et cetera. Solar energy is the biggest growing industry. It's one of the biggest growing industries, the energy and in the energy industry. Solar and wind are the 2 top growing sectors in the energy industry. And if we're not jumping on board with those, we are missing out on revenue. We're not going to be moving forward in our county. We're not going to be attracting businesses to our county. We're not going to be attracting workers to our county. And we don't benefit from the taxes that they can bring into our county. So we're really all losing out because of this refusal to kind of jump forward and think about what's going to help us in the future. So just from a pragmatic point of view, even if we just even leave that, which I agree with Lori, the real issue is we have to change the way we're using energy consumption. So we need to start doing it now. But even if we look at it from a more pragmatic, you know, just I'm in it for me kind of point of view, we're losing out too. So why are we doing this? And the government is telling private farmers, private landowners, and private businesses that they can't do a contract together. And they're over-regulating these private landowners and these private businesses. And I think it's I hate to say it, a real overreach of government. Government should not be demanding. Could you imagine if a new restaurant opened and it had to put down $100,000 surety in case it closed down in 10 years? and the county might have to do something with it. Why do they demand that of solar farms? It just does not make sense. So, you know, a warehouse goes up or a manufacturing plant goes up and it has to put down $100,000 or $500,000 to, you know, what's going to happen to your building if you decide to move out of it. We might have to take it apart. You know, these questions just get raised in my head. It just isn't making logical sense to me.
I
So,
know you've told us before, but when are the county commissioner meetings?
Lori, that's your cue.
Okay. So they're Tuesdays at 9, but the second Tuesday of the month is a planning meeting. So there's not one like last week, they had their planning meeting. And if there's ever 5 Tuesdays, they have elected themselves not to have one on a 5th Tuesday because I don't know why.
I really like the letters that you keep putting on the Thursday blast. And I think it's helpful for people to know specifically what they should say.
Yeah.
But I'm also wondering if we shouldn't also maybe put in there, you can watch these meetings and put in the address where they would log on to. So for this next Thursday, if you could do that, Lori, I think that would just be, we just have to keep hammering it.
Yeah, I would be happy to. They are, I think I told everybody this, but like the first couple I went to, it was like I wanted to slip my wrists. I mean, they are super boring.
Mhm.
But every once in a while, something pops up that it's like, are you kidding? They can't do that. Are you kidding? So in the last meeting, they were talking about broadband, which I'm not even going to get into, but nobody wanted to be on that committee. So Meriwether said, and I quote, you know, I'm not technical and I don't really even know if I understand what broadband is, but if nobody else wants to be on that committee, I'll be on it. Now, broadband is hugely important.
You know, this is an example of the level of incompetence we're seeing at the county commissioner level. And I'm going to call it that blatant incompetence. There's not a level of, we're going to understand the issues and we're going to be serious about this work. It's more of a, oh, well, maybe, you know, unless it's an issue that is really important and I'm going to say maybe has money behind it. I'm just being maybe a little cynical there. But, you know, there's not a serious look at what's good for the county and what really is going to benefit our county. And there's almost like this flippant attitude about the work they're doing sometimes. And the meetings I just walked away from one meeting shaking my head and thought if I had ever run a meeting that poorly run, I should have been fired because it was not good. It had no point to it. They went around in circles. They made people angry. It was not a well-run meeting. So it's pretty sad to see the lack of competence happening. So
I will say that 2 other commissioners, you know, then said, no, we'll do it because I think I'm sure they thought people are watching this. You know, this was crazy, but 2 other commissioners, and I don't even remember. I think one was Delighten that decided he would be on broadband, but I can't remember for sure.
and there's now a broadband committee starting up, but there is no call for people to be on that committee or anything. It's just been started up. In fact, John Dietering was trying to do something with broadband in the county and has been talking to people, wasn't even invited to be part of that committee at all. So
I think, Renee, I can get the link. I'll send it to you.
okay,
Okay.
that meeting's tomorrow if anybody's interested in broadband in our county and going and watching what they're doing. I don't know if I can attend, Lori, or not, but you can send it over and we'll pass it to the whole group and see.
Well, the first ones are really, I mean, they're just a lot of nonsense going on because they don't really know what they're doing. But at any rate, I'll see if I can get the link.
So I think we kind of covered this, and we're 3 minutes to 8. I don't want to keep people late. Is there any pressing questions or comments that anybody wants to add? No. We did it well then. Every answer people's questions.
Good meeting, Renee.
Would you
Yes.
share that address that you told us about, Renee, about one of the one of the pictures you had was very nice.
Commissioners?
The commissioners,
Oh, where do you go get the information about county commissioners?
yes.
It's just on the county website. So if you do Wright County, they have their own website, and you can do Wright County Commissioners and you pull up their information. So I showed a picture of the transportation systems. That might be the one you're thinking of. Or there was the one of the different commissioner districts. All of those are just on the website. All you have to do, a very easy Google search for them. That's how I found them.
And like Renee said, if you want to find the meeting, you just do Wright County Commissioners, click on it, and it will say, especially if you do it Tuesday morning, it'll say, you know, like meeting starts in 1 hour, or meeting starts in 10 minutes or something like that. And then you just click and it says, do you want to listen? And if you say yes, you just click on the link and wait for them to start.
And you can go in public person too.
Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
nice if we could get like 10 people every meeting, whether or not they're actually listening, but to click on it, just to create the pressure of hello, people are listening to you. I mean, it makes
Yeah.
such a difference when you have a closed meeting or when you know that somebody's listening to you.
I do think it makes a difference. I think,
Yeah.
and
for sure.
and Lori and I really started this off, you know, looking at solar because we're interested in solar, but also because we're interested just in how the county functions. And so that was our goal, is to understand it better. And we're finding that we should have been paying attention all along. So it's good that we are doing this now. So
Guys are awesome. Thank you.
well,
Yes.
thank you, Kim.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
helpful. I should be able to put this on our YouTube channel or
Oh,
YouTube,
good.
whatever site.
Yep.
So that you should be able to see it tomorrow. This computer is very slow about downloading things, but hopefully I'll have it up there tomorrow. So Mark.
And
if
are you
there's-
able to put those other two things up tomorrow too? The two videos I shared with you from Earth Day and
I
stuff.
should probably go look at that. Yeah, I could do that if I wrote myself a note.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
well, everybody, it's 8 o'clock and I want to let you go because I like to end these meetings on time.
Okay.
I run
Thanks,
effective,
everybody.
efficient meetings.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Renee.
Thank you very much.
Lori.
Yep,
Thanks,
you're welcome.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
You
Good night.
too.